Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. Another big home game, another loss, this time to the Michigan State Spartans. A lot to talk about, so without further ado, let's run it. This one ends with the final score of Michigan State 76, Purdue 74. Very, very mixed feelings about this one. It was amazing to be back in West Lafayette, see family. We got to go out to all the spots and catch up and see an amazing basketball game, but very disappointed in the result, and especially with the how. And we'll dive into that and more in this one. Um, there's going to be a lot to talk about, so I'm going to try to keep the ball rolling through everything to keep this from being an hour-long episode. But let's get right into it. This is the fourth game lost in Mackey Arena this year, equaling the total Purdue had lost over the past three seasons combined, the 2022-23 season through last year 2024-25. And this is the first time that this has happened since the 2019-2020 season, with a team that went 16 and 15 and 9 and 11 in conference play and would have been 10th in the current, at that point, Big Ten standings going into the Big Ten tournament if it were not for the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, it's tough. It's not what we're used to seeing, as blessed as we are as Boilermaker fans. But it was not the result we were looking for. But from my personal experience from the game, the arena was amazing. Going back and getting to see all of the intros again, the paint crew, getting to see it from outside the student section, outside the paint crew is certainly a fun and interesting experience. But I mean, it continues to live up to everything that we make it out to be, but unfortunately we're struggling to get some of the results from it. But going into the game itself, right off the bat, I think one of the glaring issues that popped up in my head, especially now being able to go back and watch this game again, and kind of take it all in a second time, look at a little bit bigger detail. Right off the bat, Carson Cooper had an easy back down over Clough, first bucket of the game. Um, that was a big indicator of what would come for him, and also for kind of just the way that our center position would go. Not for Clough, which we'll talk about here, but um, the thing though is after that first possession, we fired back. We had ended up with a great start to this game. We started off with a CJ3. Braden ended up getting a steal. We went on a 9-0 run after that first bucket, and Clough got going for 8 early points in the first 5 minutes. The biggest question: why did we go away from him? And I've talked about this with the friends I was staying with. Shout out Ryan and Jazz, massive Purdue fans like I am, as well as my family. Is why are we going with these auto subs at certain points of the game and ignoring what's happening, knowing who's playing well, what run we're on? We got off to a fantastic start, and Clough was a huge part of that on both ends of the floor, defending the ball well, and getting rebounds and on both ends because he's offensive rebounding as well. Um, and then at the 5 minute mark, we take him out. With Cooper guarding TKR, Clough got the Jackson Kohler matchup on offense for him, defense for Kohler, and that was a big part of the reason why he was able to succeed. They wanted Cooper on TKR because TKR has been this dominant post scorer in recent games. Kohler, he's a great stretch big. He's not a super elite post defender, and Clough got going right away with like at least one post bucket. He got a lob dunk off a baseline out of bounds. He got an offensive rebound. He was active. And the thing was, is it just killed both his individually and Purdue's momentum when we took him out less than 5 minutes into the game. At that point in time, he already had 8 points, a defensive rebound, a tipped offensive rebound they didn't even give him credit for in the stat sheet. They only gave Oscar Clough credit for one offensive rebound. Watching back through, it was two or three times in this game that I saw Clough get a tip out to somebody else who collected the offensive rebound. They give the offensive rebound to the guy that got the ball, not Clough, but entirely caused by him and him alone. But he also had a deflection on defense as MSU was trying to push the ball down the floor and throw it ahead. And at that point in time, Purdue was up 13-6. Jacobson comes in. and is on the ground after stumbling trying to recover from a ball screen, not 16 whole seconds into his first minute of this game. And unfortunately, it was downhill from there. The next offensive possession ends up in a 5-second call on the baseline out of bounds for Purdue because we couldn't set our screens correctly. It wasn't necessarily entirely Jacobson, but I can't say he didn't have a part of it. Spartans come down the floor in an and one Fears for three at the top of the key, and there goes our 7 point lead to three. Your momentum slashed, and all the electricity and aggression that you saw Purdue and Mackey Arena, the entirety of Mackey Arena, just disintegrated, and all in one total game minute since Clough left the floor. It was tough to watch because not only was it just that, but that continued for the next 3 game minutes where MSU went on a 10-0 run, aka a kill shot by Evan Mia. He's a basketball analyst that a lot of people have heard of. Him and Ken Palm both have their websites with various stats, but a kill shot is specifically a stat that he tracks for sort of the volatility and explosiveness of teams in any given game. As you know, how often do you go on a 10-0 run in either direction? Do you go on a 10-0 run or do you give up a 10-0 run? Well, MSU with a quick kill shot right there after we had an amazing start. And it felt like so much of that was just from like a couple of those quick subs where I love the depth. I love that we can go to so many different guys. But if something's working and somebody is working right off the bat, don't go away from it. Why? Don't mess it up. And unfortunately, it did. But back to that Fears and one that sparked that run. We cannot foul jump shooters like we did in this game. The discipline is so important. Fears, of course, had that and one there. Lawyer fouled Jordan Scott on a three with 30 seconds to go in the first half, which he hit two of those three to cut Purdue's lead to three right before the break. Whereas, he misses that shot. We don't foul. That could be, a anywhere between like a 2 to 5 point swing. If he doesn't get those free throws, we may be able to get a bucket on the other end. It's all speculation, but it's still very important to keep an eye on because this game was all about that back and forth and those little things because, the highest leads in this game were 8 points for Michigan State late in the second half there and seven for Purdue here early on. And all of it swung momentum in one way or another. So, but not to keep dogging on Jacobson, but there are still just some glaring things about his game that I cannot ignore. Another one of the things that I saw watching this game back is Braden finds him on the right block on the offensive end. He catches one dribble straight back towards the free throw line, towards half court, and takes a jump hook from the Big Ten logo in front of the free throw line. Probably turned a 5 foot shot, maybe into like 12. The biggest issue that I have with so much of his play is the effort, the sense of urgency, and the physicality. On both ends of the floor, it seems like he just thinks he can get away being a passive watcher, and he really could learn a thing or two from Clough's sense of aggression. And I'm going to talk about, a couple of things here with Jacobson, but I could quite frankly do like a 20+ minute video breaking down just film from this game alone on stuff that I saw from Clough and the positives. He had a couple of negatives, but so much of the positives from Clough and the energy and the effort and the offensive rebounding and boxing out and defensive rebounding and Jacobson's lack of energy, his lack of physicality, ability to get pushed out, falling on the floor, throwing the ball away after offensive rebounds, stuff like that. Don't know if there's any interest in that, but let me know if there is because it was striking watching this back. I was frustrated watching the game live, watching it back. It was kind of brutal to see. But for Jacobson, it's just there's no physicality. He's all too content on so many possessions to just let himself get pushed around and get pushed off the block. And it's a big part of the reason why he struggles mightily in the post because he has the height to shoot over these guys, but he can't hold his ground. If he holds his ground in that, 5 to 7, maybe even as far back as 10 foot range, he gets a pretty comfortable jump hook off. But he gets pushed back to this 12, 13 foot range, mid post. It makes that jump hook so much harder, and he has to, physically push it and try to get some arc on it. And he did in this one, and it falls right off the front rim. But again, the next defensive possession, 6'8" freshman Cam Ward gets a loose ball under the basket and just gets a nice, easy reverse layup with barely any real contest from our, elite shot blocker in Jacobson because he just gets nudged and kind of just finds himself floating out away from the basket and just kind of watching, seeing if he can, get a little hand in there. And by the time that Ward gets a shot off, he's 4 feet away from him and he can't, make a real contest, much less get an actual block there. And once again, end of that 10-0 run for Michigan State, Kim Ward gets a nice, easy putback dunk because where's Jacobson? Letting himself get calmly, lightly sealed by Kohler halfway out to the three-point line. It was so wild for me to watch this back because in the moment you see the basket like, damn, that's unfortunate, but you just see him being a passive watcher in so many of these possessions where your job as a center, regardless of your height, is to man the paint. And I get that there's times you get sealed. He drove baseline, shot attempt, and Ward came from the opposite side. He wasn't the guy that was supposed to be guarding Ward. That was, I think, TKR on the help, or something of that nature. But how do you let yourself just get sealed and just kind of watch like, oh, man, I hope we get that ball. I hope we stop that. And then they just get a putback dunk and it's nothing. And it just trots back down the floor. There's no energy, there's no effort, there's no enthusiasm, there's no care. It's like he doesn't care. And that just bothers me. And I get that he has to learn. I hope and pray that he's going to continue to get stronger and better and more comfortable in his, 25-pound heavier frame than the prospect that got him as highly ranked as he was. He needs to learn a bigger style of play and he's shown a lot of flashes in the first half of the season in non-conference play. But the problem is you're trying to be a Big Ten center. You're not trying to be an SEC center. You're not trying to be a Big 12 center. You're not trying to be an ACC center. You're trying to be a playmaker, a difference maker in Big Ten basketball. And that requires a level of physicality that he, quite frankly, just does not possess right now because he does not try. I know that he's a lighter, but 250 pounds, it's about being the low man. It's about getting down and saying, I know that you're going to try to undercut me. Well, I'm going to try to hit right back. He doesn't hit back. He wants to hit up here. He wants to just being able to bump shoulders and get a little hook off, or bump shoulders and go up for a rebound, and he just gets thrown all over the place, and that's why he ends up on the ground so much. But enough about that. Like I said, could make an entire separate video on that. But another big thing from this first half, that was a huge difference maker, or could have been a huge difference maker, is we had like 2 or 3 shots that literally rolled around the rim and did not drop. It could have looked very different, if one or more of those fell. But at the end of the day, that's all wishes and luck. We still ended up with, a lead at the end of the first half, despite so many of our, little mistakes here and there, and them taking advantage of a lot of those situations. Um, but one of the things that I do want to talk about Braden Smith's play specifically, he has a solid game, but in a big game like this, I think you want and come to expect more, especially with the start that he got off as a playmaker. He had 7 first half assists. Throughout the course of this game, there is merit to people complaining and being upset about the fact that he kind of looks like he might be assist hunting at times. He was passing up layups. He got a little too fancy trying to get some of these, wrap around or cross court passes. There was one, where I want to say it was in the first half, and he came off a screen, and I swear just assumed or believed that the rotations were not going to be there, and he could just fire a cross court pass to Fletcher Loyer on the far side. And it just went right into the hands of, I believe, Jordan Scott in help side. It wasn't even close. Like he didn't even tip it. He just flat out caught it. Some of his mistakes were tipped out of bounds. Other terms turned into actual turnovers or live ball turnovers. And he did end up with 4 turnovers on the game. Could have been more if some of those didn't get tipped out of bounds and were true turnovers. But in games like this and in all games from here on out, we need aggressive Braden Smith. We need the junior year Braden Smith that was the Bob Cousy Award winner specifically because he was not only efficient, because he's more efficient this year than he was last year, but because he was aggressive. because he knew that the team needed him in not only in his top form, hunting his shots, that that he knew that he could take on anybody, whether it be at the rim, understanding his various different finishes, getting mid-range shots over these guys, knowing when to pull up from the three-point range, and if they went under screens, just stop and pull. It feels like it's not doubting his shot, but that he's ignoring the opportunities. He doesn't have that killer mentality for finding those shots in all games than he did last year. There are some games that we've seen, he's been a killer shooter, but not all. And there's games like this where you just start seeing him start trying to force these passes. And he talks about, he's talked plenty of times, both in interviews and in the Running Point Pod and Sleepers Media, that he doesn't care about the assist record. He's trying to cut down the nets. But I got to be honest, there's some more actions here that kind of speak otherwise, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets anybody in his corner, anybody in that locker room, coaching staff, other teammates that kind of talk to him about that. But we need that aggressive killer Braden Smith if we want to make a run in March, especially with the way that this team looks as a whole on the defensive end. Just you talk about the seniority, the leadership. That's the Braden Smith we need. But another aspect of this game that was interesting to see and unfortunate with some speculation around it was the play of CJ Cox. He had a pretty darn solid performance. He only plays 19 minutes, only gets 4 shots off, but he was 2 for 3 from three. Did some great things on the defensive end. He caused a turnover on Fears early, which they didn't even credit as a turnover to Fears, or I think a steal for CJ Cox. CJ Cox ends up with 2 steals. Realistically, I would call it 3 because CJ tips a pass, or not tips a pass, actually. He knocked the ball away from Fears, ends up with a shot clock violation for Michigan State. They called that team dead ball turnover as opposed to a Jeremy Fears turnover. But CJ Cox was the highest plus minus on the team with 9. But it felt like he could have gotten a lot more minutes in this game, given what he was able to do on the defensive end. We did not have a lot of success guarding Jeremy Fears throughout a lot of this game with guys like Omer Meyer, with guys like Jakari Harris. When Braden Smith got switched on to him, he was getting in the lane constantly, getting in the lane, getting mid-range buckets, finding the passer off of these screens. But CJ Cox was the one that had the most success on him. But you know, one of the things that was brought up in actually it was I found it in the Sleepers Media recap comment section. There was a YouTube commenter who claims to have been sitting near Purdue's bench, and that I don't know what point in the game this was, but apparently Cox failed to stop the ball after a defensive rebound and push by Fears. And Painter chewed him out on the bench and benched him for 5, 7 minutes of the game. Because he did come back in stretches, usually again like these. I think he kind of came in for roughly 4 5-minute stretches, which is how he ends up with those 20 minutes. That's kind of indicative of a lot of those guys that kind of exist within that 15 to 20 minute game action. But this was a game that, like, man, first of all, him being +9, it was clear that with his shot making and what he was able to do on the defensive end, he was a big difference maker. And yet he was not on the floor for half of this game. He is our perennial defensive stopper. We're struggling to stop them from getting the lane. We're struggling to get stops when we're trying to dig into this deficit here in the second half, and he's not on the floor. That doesn't make sense to me. I get that, maybe he messed up and Painter finally chewed him out and finally decided to make stand his ground and make a decision to take a guy out when he wasn't doing what the team needed him to do. But then you also need to get that guy back in the game if he's the only one having that success on the defensive end. That just it doesn't make sense to me. But he did pretty much everything that you need out of a 3-and-D guard, especially a 2 guard on this team. Out of all the options that we got, Omer Meyer obviously was great hitting shots. He's not Omer Meyer is a good, I think, a better on-ball defender than a lot of people give him credit for, as he's gotten better throughout the course of this year, but he's not CJ Cox. And if CJ was able to knock down those shots and also do that on the defensive end, he needs to be in this basketball game. But speaking of defense, I want to talk about the defense of the big three as a whole: Braden, Fletcher, TKR. If there is one thing that will be a scar on these three seniors' illustrious careers with Purdue, it will be their lack of defensive capabilities. They have led Purdue to some of the best offenses in the country and even statistically in Ken Palm history, over these last 3 seasons or 4 seasons really with your two Zach Edey teams last year and this year. But the problem has always been the defensive side. With Zach Edey, we were able to work through that because we had an immense shot blocker and just paint deterrent. Because even if he wasn't blocking shots, people didn't want to try to shoot over Edey. He would have averaged like 4 blocks per game if people tried, to actually challenge him as much as they could have. But, they would just run out of the lane. But individually, player by player, Braden Smith is an elite off-ball defender. He averages, 2 steals per game, something around there. He ends up with only 1 steal in this one, but because of his instincts off the ball. But on the ball, obviously, he's undersized at 6 foot generously, and I don't know, 175, 180 pounds, maybe 190, something like that. But he struggles to keep people in front of him because he's quick, but he's not super physical. Um, and he can't always make up for that with his active hands and on-ball pressure. But he's not the worst out of this big three. Fletcher Lawyer, I'm sorry, he's 6'5", 180, and there's been a game or two this season where I've been able to praise Fletch for his instincts off the ball or even just being a bit more physical. This was not one of them. He has consistently, over the course of his career, been a defensive liability, especially at a small forward position at 6'5", facing a lot of the more athletic wings in this conference. And it's why a lot of people called for Purdue to bring in an athletic defense forward, 6'4" to 6'7" wing. A guy like I want to say it was Davis that ended up going to BYU, came out of Southern Illinois. A guy like Lance Jones, what Lance Jones was able to bring into our team as a defensive stopper, 3 and D to put next to these guys. That kind of perfect fit. That need is caused by Fletcher Lawyer being one of the best shooters in the country, so you can't take him off the floor that much, but really struggling on the defensive end. And then you get to TKR. TKR, unfortunately, he can't hang on the perimeter. He's too slow to guard like these versatile pick and pop fours like a Tyler Bilodeau. We struggled to guard him, and we honestly got lucky in this game with the Jackson Kohler. He's another one that I think was I was worried about him in this game. We got lucky that he was just cold from three. But those type of guys, TKR struggles to guard on the perimeter there, but he's also too short at 6'8", 6'9", and that might be generous to guard either the bigger fours or the classic post up fives. Um, and it's had a massive effect on Purdue's ceiling as a team, both defensively and overall. Um, and that ties directly in to some of the issues that I feel personally that we've had in Mackey Arena this year. And it's like, okay, how does that specifically tie in? And this even goes back into some of the years past, but people have had comments about the Mackey crowd being different this year, and the Mackey magic isn't quite there because we have such a good team, but also we've, struggled to win games at home. Watch the tape, get in the arena, be within that crowd. I will tell you firsthand that crowd is not different. Those students are not quieter. But the biggest difference, regardless of whether or not we're hitting on the offensive end, the crowd is gonna be in it on the defensive end, especially in these big games, trying to, be that sixth man that Purdue needs them to be. But they will be electric and loud massive if we can get stops. Constantly trading buckets or just giving up shots is killer to the vibes and the momentum and the electricity in that arena. You saw in those last couple of minutes, whether it's on the broadcast or had the honor of being in the arena to watch this game, Mackey was roaring when we got some of those final stops, when Braden and Benter were able to get those 2 late threes to cut back in that lead, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, we're right back into this. It was electric. It was roaring. But that last bucket by Kohler to extend the lead back out to 4, that bucket by Jordan Scott to stifle our lead a little bit, it just drains the arena. And that is not just indicative of those last couple of minutes, that's throughout the course of the game. Mackey Arena has been a hellscape for opponents to come in when we are able to go on those massive runs. In years past, Purdue has been super, super popular for those kill shots that I talked about with Evan Mia, going on those massive runs that are just defeating and just deflating for opponents. Well, we haven't had that as much this year. The thing is we've been quite frankly, we've been more in the middle end in terms of we can still go on those 10-0 offensive runs when the shots are going crazy and against, more inferior opponents that, struggle against our defense a little bit more. But the problem is against some of these middle end and then better teams in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten, of course, is loaded this year, we're giving up those 10-0 runs. And you saw that in this game. You saw that in the 10-0 run early. And I think they also had like a 9-0 run later in this game. Um, it it's so much harder to recover from and keep that electricity and that energy in the arena and rebuild that every single defensive possession when we can't get a stop. I mean, I was in the arena. My vibes were the ones that were getting killed. The constant getting up to cheer and sitting back down. Because, of course, when you're not in the paint crew, a lot of the arena sits for most of the offensive possessions, unless it's, big time possessions at the end. But it's just so crucial. And if we can't get stops, not only can we not cut back into these leads that we're giving up, but we can't keep that energy up to make it that much more difficult for those teams to get those buckets. It's just it's tough. But moving on from that, I also want to talk about sort of the biggest difference first half to second for Braden's game and the way that Michigan State defended him. He had 7 first half assists and like he had them flowing early. He had them going through a good portion of the half. He gets a second foul late in the first half, so he's out for the last like 2 minutes of the first half, but they had a hard time keeping him in front of them for a good portion of the first half, and he's able to find shooters. He's able to get in the lane and find guys like Clough early. You got the baseline out of bounds lob to Clough I mentioned earlier. You got another baseline out of bounds where Braden got it immediately fired to Fletch for a quick three before MSU was even ready to defend the baseline out of bounds. He had the juices flowing, but in the second half, they did a much better job of the hard hedge and ball screens, the pushing him back out. Especially there's a set that Purdue runs where they clear out the left side, they run a double screen across the top of the key, trying to get either a roller to the basket or a guy filling into the backside. From the backside to the top of the key for a three there, and then go high-low or go directly into the paint there. They were pushing Braden out from there, causing him either even if he did make a solid pass, they were able to rotate back and need a one more pass for Purdue to get a shot. But also they were able to cause, a couple of turnovers, a couple of, just making things a whole lot harder. They were stifling his momentum and his ability to get downhill. But also another big thing, even if he was able to get downhill, this was the point in the second half where he was trying to get too fancy. He was trying to get downhill, and instead of taking the layup, there was at least once or twice where it's like he got downhill and he had what seemed to be a clear layup. I think the one I'm thinking was probably in the first half, but it happened in the second half too, where instead of taking that layup, he tries to fire back out. He tries to do a little, sneaky dump off. Take the layup, take the easy bucket, take what the defense gives you. I mean, he ends up with 10 assists on the game, which is still great, but he had the opportunity to get to 13, 14, 15 if he just kept doing what was working. If he kept, just taking what the defense gives you, because if you attack the rim there and just take those buckets, now all of a sudden they have to do a whole lot more, aggressive rotations or aggressive, switches, altering their positions to try to stop you from doing that the next time. Keep them on their toes. The problem is you allowed them to be the aggressors on determining where you want to go based on the fact that they know that he wants to pass it. When they got the feeling that he wasn't, that killer aggressive version of Braden, all of a sudden now you sit a little bit more in the dump down. You sit a little bit more. Those guys in help defense are sitting on those rotations, trying to pick off those passes across the floor. It was just it goes right back into the fact of him needing to be, more and more aggressive, because if he's aggressive, those assist opportunities will still be there. So just make the right decision. And he does that so often, but in this game it felt like there was just a couple too many opportunities that it started to feel evident that some of those decisions were wrong. And sometimes that's hard to see, in real time in the game, but I certainly felt it watching it live. But I also want to talk about MSU's biggest lead of the game. This was back and forth all game long. Purdue obviously jumped out to that early 7 point lead. That was Purdue's highest lead of the game. And then into the second half, it was Michigan State that kind of flipped the script on that back and forth. And it was Michigan State jumping out to a 2 to 4 point lead and Purdue constantly kind of keeping them at bay. Um, well, that kind of built up to the point of a rough stretch that led to Michigan State's biggest lead of 8 points. And the way this happened is Braden had two made free throws to cut the lead to two with 5:48 to play. Then Fierce comes down the following play, blows by Braden off of a curl cut. He already had that head of steam, just goes right past Braden, dumps it off to Ward as two guys come up to contest him. Easy dunk. Now we got 4 point game. Braden comes back down the floor, follows that up by dribbling straight through a help defender for his fourth turnover game. Live ball turnover. Michigan State brings it down the floor, misses a shot, but takes advantage of a missed box out by TKR. I don't know if he was gassed a little bit by this point, but Jordan Scott on the perimeter. TKR, instead of going and find a body, turns and just looks at the ball. And Jordan Scott comes flying through, jumps directly over him, gets the offensive rebound, gets fouled. There in the bonus, he makes both free throws. It's now a 6 point lead. Purdue comes back down, tries to go inside, gets Clough one-on-one. But guess what? This is not the same Clough that we had in the early going because, for one reason or another, he got his momentum and his spark and his post moves just kind of killed it. It was still a good move, don't get me wrong. He got a solid hook shot off, but he misses that one. And Michigan State comes back down and Fears snakes his way through a ball screen to get all the way to the rim for a layup. And that leads to an 8 point lead for the Spartans with 4 minutes to play. This happens all in the span of less than 2 minutes. Goes from a 2 point game to an 8 point game. So a big part of how all this happened was points off turnovers and fast break points. We had limited them to only two fast break points when Robbie Hummel brought it up on the broadcast with 18 minutes to play in the second half. They end up with 10 for the game. So they got out and running, whether it be off of the turnovers, we had, a fair couple of those turnovers in the second half there they were able to take advantage of. But also just getting into the paint. We couldn't keep them in front of us. I mentioned two of those stretches was Jeremy Fears just blowing by us either on a cut or just through a ball screen. The layup that Fears got, Jack Benter comes in help defense and looks to take a charge. And unfortunately, against a guy like Jeremy Fears, who has great instincts for, getting to the basket and finding the right guy, he's not going to be one of those guys that just barrels straight through and tries to go up for, over the top layup right in front of the rim. Instead, he snakes around him and is able to get that easy layup. But we gave up 40 points in the paint out of their 76 total. But they also made 12 free throws. They were 12 for 16 from the free throw line. So when you take those two things into account, that is only 24 points scored from outside the lane. And they were 6 for 19 from three, which means that is 18 points from three. So they existed from the 3 point line, the free throw line, and inside the paint. And for a team that obviously is not a star-studded offense or like a super efficient offense like Purdue, that's what you can't let them do. They want to exist in the paint. Jeremy Fears wants to get downhill. That they want to take advantage of Cooper and Kohler. And I haven't even talked about the fact that we let Carson Cooper get a KenPom MVP and lead their team in scoring with 15 on super efficient shooting. I'll get to the box score stuff here very soon. But you got to keep them out of the paint. And that's just been the story of Purdue's, defense this entire season is we don't have the guys to, as a whole, or at least we're not putting out the lineups that can keep these guys in front of us off the dribble. Especially with teams that have, more downhill point guards or more, bigger athletics, slasher wings. So, I said 24 points scored from outside the lane. 18 of those came from threes. So that's 6 points from the mid-range. That was as much as we were able to stop them and stop them from getting in the lane, and they were content to shoot mid-ranges. So it's disappointing to see. That this team wants to get inside, but you also know as a game plan, like that's what they're going to do. So stop it, or at least limit it. I'll talk here about the rebounding, but at least we were able to limit that. Like, you know what the scout is. Do it. Speaking of the scout, oh my gosh, I almost forgot to mention there were multiple times throughout this game where it felt like Purdue once again did not understand the individual personnel scout. Like we are closing out way too hard on guys that first of all, you got to close out under control. That's a big part of the reason that we're able to get inside so easily is you close out super, super hard, they pump fake or just don't even bother putting up a hard pump fake and just drive right past you because all your momentum is sprinting towards them. But then you also have guys like Cam Ward. Great example of this. This kid is not a three-point shooter. He is a 6'8" freshman. Let's see, on the season, yeah, on the season, he is a quite literal 0% three-point shooter. He has shot two threes all year and multiple times this game, at least once that I remember, but I'm pretty sure multiple times. We had a hard, hard closeout. Like this guy is like Jeremy Fears or like it's Jordan Scott, those guys that have been killing us from three, or Kerr Tang, because Kerr Tang looked great in this game. Man, know the personnel. But I got to move on from that, or else once again, this is going to be, an insanely long game. I want to take a quick look. We're going to kind of speed through some of the box score stuff from either teams. Both teams were incredibly balanced scoring wise. For Michigan State, nobody ends with over 15 points. You've got 15 from Carson Cooper, 13 from Kerr Tang off the bench, which was amazing for them, 12 from Fears, 11 from Cohen Carr, 9 from Scott, 8 from Kohler, 8 from Cam Ward. So everybody that scored, other than Denim Wojcik, who came in for 4 minutes and was not good for them, all of the rest of their guys, those 7 guys, all played well, all got their buckets. And that was big time for them. They shot the ball pretty solidly, not necessarily fantastically. 29 for 55 from the floor, 53%. They did not shoot the ball well from three. 32%, 6 for 19, like I mentioned earlier. They were 12 for 16 from the free throw line, so they got to the line a fair amount, but nothing super crazy. Made 75% of them. 25 rebounds for them, 15 assists as a team, only 6 turnovers. That was big. Not a huge turnover margin or turnover differential, but just to be able to keep themselves to 6 turnovers when they themselves have struggled with turnovers throughout the year was huge for them in this game. They ended up with 6 steals, which again was a big part of getting out in the fast break and getting some of those easier buckets against Purdue's non-set defense. And only one block. But the big thing about this is comparing that to Purdue. The only thing major, it's not even major, we shot the ball a little bit worse from them overall. 28 for 57, 49%. So that's right about on average for us, maybe a little under our average. We average about 50% from the floor as a team. We shot 12 for 25 from three. We shot almost 50%, almost 48% from three. They shoot 32%. We make 6 more threes than them. We make one less, just one less field goal than them. And we still lose this game. Big part of the reason we only got to the free throw line 9 times, went 6 for 9. Got to make your free throws, especially at home. There's no hostile crowd. You got 2 for 4 from TKR, 0 for 1 from Daniel Jacobson. Unfortunately, again, it's the same culprits where they're going to get to the line at times and they struggle to make them. Obviously, really could have used those here. But rebounding, it was an even rebounding battle, 27-25. It was dead even 19-19 on the defensive end, and we out-rebounded them on the offensive end 8-6. That was big time. That was exactly what we needed from the rebounding battle. Obviously, you would like to get a little bit more of an advantage, but Michigan State averages 41 rebounds per game. They are an elite rebounding team. I want to say they're like top 15 or top 10 in the country in just rebounds per game. So for us to be able to keep them off the offensive glass as much as we did, as well as also, get 8 offensive rebounds, that's big time. That's exactly what we needed. But another big thing is assists. We had 23 assists on 28 made field goals. That's great. But what it also tells me is when we got our actions blown up throughout this game, all of a sudden our plays aren't quite getting the open shots we're looking for. We struggled to get a lot of individual playmaking. Sometimes that comes from Braden. Sometimes that comes from TKR. Obviously, they were doubling TKR more, so he ends up passing the ball a lot. We'll get into his individual stat line here very soon. But yeah, quite honestly, you love assisting the ball that much. It means that we're making shots and sharing the ball at an elite level. But we also need some individual playmaking when stuff gets tough, and that's going to happen a lot more in these close games against really good teams. And that's what it comes down to in March. So we'll see if we can get guys to step up like that. But individual stat lines for Purdue specifically, we were another team, similar to Michigan State. We were very balanced overall. Nobody scored more than 12 on Purdue, and that was Braden. Braden Smith's stat line specifically, 12 points, 4 of 10 shooting, 2 for 7 from 3. So he was the one guy that really wasn't having a great game from 3, but he did hit at least that one late. That was massive in giving us a chance late. 2 for 2 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 10 assists, 4 turnovers and a steal. He played solid, but I've spoken plenty about his game over the course of today. Needed a more aggressive version than him, even if it's not from 3, even if he's not hitting threes. I think he had a lot of opportunities at the basket or to pull up from the mid range that for some reason he just didn't quite take for one reason or another. But I want to go into TKR. He plays 33 minutes. There's some things I mentioned there that maybe he got gassed a little bit, but he's never been one to really flame out in games where he's playing a lot of minutes. He only has 10 points, 4 of 8 shooting. He got some good looks that didn't go in, especially including one of the last looks that Purdue got to try to tie the game at the end there with a post up and a little baby hook over the shoulder that he hits at a high percentage a lot of the time. Couldn't get to fall on this one. 2 for 4 in the free throw line is the unfortunate big one that we could have used those free throws. 6 rebounds, not a super electric rebounding game for him, but he was really battling out there. Big thing was 7 assists to 1 turnover. So he, with 10, 6, and 7, was borderline on triple double watch, even more so than Braden with only his 5 rebounds. But he was passing out of the double team very well once again for him to end up with 7 assists in this one. Once again, very happy to see that his passing is continuing to improve and his decision making, only ending up with the 1 turnover there. That was pretty big. And he also ended up with a block. Clough talked about his start. He had 8 points in the first 5 minutes, ends up with only 10 on the game. He goes 5 for 9 from the floor, 4 rebounds. But once again, I mentioned they also took away like 2 potential offensive rebounds for him, where, I would absolutely credit him with the offensive rebounds that, somebody else ended up collecting because he tips it back, his energy, his, constant attack on the offensive glass. He was a massive reason in those. And he ends up with 1 block as well, so a relatively quiet stat line overall, but still pretty big from him. CJ Cox, I mentioned, 6 points, 2 of 4 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3, a rebound, an assist, and 2 steals. Need more of him. Fletcher Lawyer, 31 minutes, 8 points, 3 from 7, or 3 for 7 from the floor, 2 of 5 from 3. Would have liked to get him going a little bit more, but it really felt like Cohen Carr kind of threw him off. Him and Kurtang and Jordan Scott, whoever kind of was switched on him at various times, they did a good job of closing out pretty hard on him and forcing Fletch to be a ball handler, and took away some open 3 looks that really he could have gotten a couple more shots off. So a lot of that I have to give credit to Michigan State's defense. But Fletch does end up with 4 assists, so he definitely did do a pretty good job of taking care of the ball or sharing the ball when he got ran off the 3-point line. Also got some solid minutes off the bench. Everybody scored 5 or more off the bench. You got 6 from Jacobson. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes on than just in that stat sheet that I talked about, so I won't dive any deeper than I already have. 6 from Omer Meyer. He continues to shoot the ball well. He was 2 for 4 from the floor, but 2 for 3 from 3. Again, I would love to continue to see him getting more shots if he's going to keep hitting him, but he did have 2 turnovers in this game, and I'll talk about those in a little bit with some of the advanced box score stats. But Jack Benter, he does have that deep 3 late that was ill-advised, and you could even tell with Painter's reaction was not really what Painter wanted out of that situation, but he ends up with 11 points, 4 of 6 shooting, 3 for 5 from 3. So he was 3 for 4 from 3 going into that last shot. He has that nice runner there late to continue to cut Michigan State's lead with 3 rebounds and a turnover for him. So again, good to see him starting to hit some shots again. He's been struggling in Big Ten play from 3. And Jakari Harris, not his best game, 1 for 4 from the floor, but he does have 5 points, 1 for 2 from 3, 2 for 2 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, and an assist. But we'll quickly run through the advanced box score stats as well. Things to highlight. I've been looking for a site or an app, and I was able to find an app that gives me flat out plus minus in comparison to this box plus minus that the advanced score stats gives us. Box plus minus is, your how many points per 100 possessions would you score translated to an average team. I liked looking at liked looking at that back in the beginning of looking at this, but I'm now seeing there's definitely some flaws with it in terms of me, how I, analyze a player's individual performance based on or compared to what that stat actually shows. Big one is Daniel Jacobson with point 0.5. You want to talk about that being an average per performance. I did not see an average performance out of Daniel Jacobson in this game because looking at plus minus, which is not on this graphic specifically, you had Daniel Jacobson at negative 14. Plus minus as a stat is just when you were on the floor. Is your team winning those minutes? Are they scoring more than they're getting scored on? Or is the other way around? Is your team getting scored on more than you are able to score in that time? So while Jacobson was on the floor, Purdue got outscored by 14. And by the way, Jacobson only played 11 minutes. So Purdue gets outscored by 14 in the 11 minutes that he plays. And similar, unfortunately, was Jakari Harris. He had minus 11. So those two guys, unfortunately, were catalysts potentially in obviously those numbers are without a lot of context in terms of how those points actually did get scored. But you know, realistically, when you look at the box plus minus, it shows that CJ Cox though did have an amazing performance in his 19 minutes, and that he could have done more, I think, if we gave him more time. But outside of that stat, looking at the turnover percentage, Braden Omer specifically, Braden has his four throughout the course of this game. It gave Michigan State a couple more of those fast break opportunities and those ones that turn into live ball turnovers, as well as Omer's two turnovers in the first half that I mentioned. Were just him trying to force his way through ball screens, kind of like the hedges or traps, just a little too much. And it goes back again to what I said earlier: take what the defense gives you. We are a good enough offensive team that if we just do that, we are going to have so much success. But sometimes we think we can force the issue a little bit more than we quote unquote need to. But a positive to highlight from this was the defensive rebounding percentage. I talked about the fact that they're an elite rebounding team averaging about 41 per game, but we out rebounded them 27-25 and kept it even on the defensive glass. Just the fact that you see 75% defensive rebound percentage, I've always mentioned your goal is to try to get around that 80%. So against a team like this, I am proud to see that. And I'm happy to see that we rebounded the ball that well. But the last one I'll look at is assist percentage. You see, as a whole, 82% is very, very high. I mentioned those 23 assists on 28 made field goals is great, but the individual playmaking did need to be there down the stretch. That just wasn't quite there. Um, but overall, I mean, we played a great game in so many aspects, but it was those little things, those little ill-advised plays, ill-advised shots, ill-advised passes. There was just a couple of decisions here and there, both players and coaching staff, that I felt like was the difference maker in such a close, tight game between two top 15, fantastic basketball teams. Unfortunate that we ended up with the loss, and there was a lot to be frustrated from it. But we keep moving on because there's still quite a few, at least a couple more tune-up games here before the Big Ten tournament. And speaking of that, coming up next, I am lucky to say that I'm able to go in person to two games in a row because the Boilermakers are coming here to Columbus, Ohio, to take on Ohio State on this first day of March here on Sunday. We seem to play better on the road than at home this year, so we'll see if we can keep that pattern up and kind of respond from this unfortunate loss and really get an electric showing to get back on track here in the month of March, heading into these last couple of games and then the Big Ten tournament. But that is all I've got for today. March is here, which means more recaps, more conference breakdowns, and Selection Sunday are all right around the corner. Stay tuned now more than ever because we are in for a wild ride. Let me know your thoughts on this game down below in the comments, and if there is any interest for me to break down Clough versus Jacobson's play from this game alone, because there was so much that I could have gone into outside of just some of those specific plays that I did mention. But if you want more from us, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm out.